This is Andi Purewal, Boxing Social in association with Betfred. I'm joined by former world champion Paulie Malignaggi here in Manchester. Paulie, firstly, how are you?
I'm good, but I could be a little bit better. You see, in the UK, as in I noticed in all of Europe, because it happens in Italy too, you're very stingy with napkins and ice. And I just got a cup of coffee at the coffee table, and on my walk over here, I spilled some. It's on my hand. Some might have got on my jeans. There's no napkins. And I don't know. I have the same issue when I go to Italy, to be honest. I ask for a cup of ice, and they give me one block of ice. Or I look for napkins, they give me one napkin. You don't even have one napkin here, bro. You have a coffee table with no napkins. What's up with that, bro? What is it with Europe and the stinginess on coffee and ice? I've got to know, bro. Like I said, even in Italy, and I used to go to Italy a lot. I mean, always the problem. And right now I got a handful of coffee holding this coffee mug because I spilled some of it and I have nothing to wipe it with.
I think that's
so I could be better.
I think that's a question for Adam and for Sky. Unfortunately, obviously Adam's not here, so.
Not even for Sky, bro. This is a country problem. This is not a network problem. This is a continental problem, actually, because like I said, even Italy has this problem.
Obviously, unfortunately, away from that, Paulie, we're here at the Manchester Boxer tournament announcement. The draw has been done. Paulie, from somebody who's achieved so much in the sport and for what's on the line for these guys on Saturday night, how life-changing of a moment can this be for whoever comes out on top?
You know, you're always guys who are in this tournament are the guys that are looking for the break. They've got pretty good records, decent records, or even very good records. They've flown below the radar. Maybe they've had some bad breaks. You know, whenever you put fighters in a desperate situation or at a situation where they can sort of catapult themselves or take the fast track, and they haven't had yet any of that in their careers, I think you end up in a situation with hungry fighters. When hungry fighters fight each other, you end up with entertaining fights. Then you put into the equation, into the recipe, that all the fights are short and there's no feel-out process. Now you've got a bunch of hungry, desperate fighters who've got to make it happen in a short period of time. And for this reason, all the boxer tournaments I've partaken in, as far as either called the fights or been here for, they've yet to be disappointing. They're all entertaining, and so it's a great opportunity for the fighters because, again, like I just explained, it's an opportunity for them to kind of fast track themselves a little bit and give themselves a little bit of notoriety. But even for the fans, this just can't miss in terms of entertainment. It probably goes a little bit below the radar as far as the bigger fights, but I'm telling you, you will get more entertainment on a tournament boxer night than you will on most big boxing cards. I'm telling you, there has not yet been one boxer card that I've worked that wasn't action-packed.
3-minute rounds, Paulie. Is it simply a matter of whoever is fighting, they have to come out quickly, they have to be out of the blocks and be aggressive from the get-go?
Yeah, I mean, you have no really feel-out process. Your feel-out process is while you're fighting. I mean, you have to come out fighting and then include the feel-out process, get the timing down, try to get the measure of your opponent while you're already in the process of fighting and throwing your hands. So, you know, there's not a lot of time to kind of adjust anything. You've got to just go and try to be smart, but also be very active and again, be smart because you also have other fights that you have to fight in case you do win, and it's all in the same night.
Paulie, talk to me about that, because obviously if you win your first fight, there's a little break in between whilst everybody else competes in their quarterfinals, the same in the semi-finals. As a former fighter yourself, how would you look to deal with that to make sure your body doesn't stiffen up and you don't let fatigue set in?
I think you probably go back to the dressing room and keep warm a little bit, you know, maybe take a 5-minute break and then, start, try already visualizing the next fight, visualizing your movement. I think it could also work to your advantage because you warmed up, and so your muscles are warmed up, your reaction timing is warmed up because you've already been in one fight. But of course, if it was a tough fight, it could be a disadvantage because, you might be broken down a little bit. So it's there's advantages, there's pros and cons to it. It depends on the opposition, it depends on the draw. As most tournament situations, the draw is very important. And it depends on your ability to adjust.
I know it can all go out of the window on Saturday night because of the format, Paulie, but people kind of see Ellis Sorrow as the favourite because he's had more of a professional career so far compared to the rest. Would you agree with that?
Honestly, man, I don't like to pinpoint one guy in these tournaments. I don't like to do that because I think it's unfair to the other guys. All of these guys are coming in with not much of a reputation. They've got small reputations. They're looking to make their reputations bigger, and they got one night to try to prove that. So if I go and tell you, look for one guy, it's not fair to the other guys because they're all in the same situation. I used to hate when people did that when I was in the amateurs, and it sometimes used to happen with me over other guys, or sometimes it happened to other guys over me, and I just didn't like that because then you're kind of taking away the attention from the whole crowd because everybody's in this together going after the same goal. So the tournament will speak for itself, the action will speak for itself, and the results will speak for themselves.
Paulie, right from this, just want to go back to this past weekend. We saw Dimitri Bivol stun people involved in the boxing world with his victory against Canelo. What did you make of Dimitri's performance and his stunning victory and win?
I thought he did a great job. He boxed very well. He was very active. Typically, we notice Canelo has a little bit of trouble when the pace gets a little bit elevated. He likes to control the pace and fight at his pace. And a lot of times he's able to do that. He's able to intimidate his opponents with his power, with his reputation, and they sort of diminish their output and don't make him work at an uncomfortable pace. But when it's been uncomfortable, you notice he has a little bit of trouble. I notice good jabbers and guys with a good pace give him trouble. And the thing about Dimitri Bivol is he had a combination of both.
What do you think went wrong for Canelo away from that? What more was you expecting to see from him on Saturday night?
No, I actually predicted him to rob Bivol. If you look at my page on YouTube, Paulie.tv, I actually predicted a controversial decision for Canelo. So the fight pretty much went as I expected. Actually, it was a bit more one-sided than I expected. I expected Canelo to be a little bit more competitive than he was, but I still expected Bivol to, if it to be a good fight. Bivol for most people think Bivol won it and then be robbed. It almost happened. I mean, one more round and they would have robbed Bivol, but I just, again, it was the same things. I was thinking the same things going into the fight. I was thinking, he doesn't like a fast pace, and Bivol typically has a fast pace. He's been fighting at a fast pace for the duration of his career. So, and so the question for me going into the fight was, can Canelo force Bivol to respect his pace like he does with other fighters? But I keep saying it, man. Eastern European fighters mentally are a different breed. They don't. Western fighters are a little bit more spoiled. They're a little bit more intimidated. Eastern European fighters, they're typically stronger-minded. You will not just break them into believing what you believe just because you're in the ring with him. And as a matter of fact, Bivol actually increased in confidence, and his output increased as the fight went on because he felt stronger and better about his ability to handle Canelo.
Well, I've seen a few people suggest over social media that in Dimitri's last couple of fights, he never elevated to the levels we saw against Canelo, to maybe buy himself into a position where Saul might have looked and thought that's a winnable fight, and obviously he's just produced such a stunning display. Do you think that could have been the case with with Bivol, when you look at the Craig Richards fight, for example, where he was always comfortable but he never produced what we saw this past weekend?
I don't think he really did all that this past weekend either. I mean, it was a bunch of straight punch combinations, and he was in and out. I mean, I just think that's what we've seen from him is his whole career. Yes, styles sometimes make fights. Canelo's very flat-footed, and you could also say that some of that is even increased because of the extra weight that he's carrying, so it made him even more flat-footed than normal. But Canelo typically is flat-footed anyway. He usually relies on more upper body movement than anything else, but he's not the quickest with his feet. And so the extra weight was only going to add to his flat-footedness. And Bivol was always an in-and-out fighter who threw a lot of straight punch combinations. I mean, it was a recipe for disaster, and nobody was considering it. I mean, I was talking to people, and they were just like, Canelo's going to catch him at a certain point. And I'm like, even if Canelo catches him, again, Eastern European fighters, they're typically rugged. You're not just going to catch them and they go away. Kovalev was different because Kovalev was kind of checked out of his career already. He wasn't the crusher mentality that he had earlier in his career, because if Kovalev had the crusher mentality of his earlier career, it would have been the same thing with Kovalev. But we saw it in the Golovkin fights. We saw it in this fight the last Saturday. When you fight one of these former Soviet fighters, they're rugged, man. You're going to have your hands full. Not that you can't beat them, but you're going to have to beat them physically and mentally to handle that a night with them. And it doesn't mean Canelo's not a very good fighter. I mean, Canelo is still a tremendous fighter. Listen, you can't hop off the bandwagon. There were people telling me he was the best Mexican fighter ever, for sure. And then people, I still like to say Chavez was the best Mexican fighter ever. People were getting mad at me. Even Mexican fans were getting mad at me for not saying that Canelo was the best Mexican fighter ever. Listen, he's tremendous. He's going to go down among the greats. But, bro, when Chavez was behind around 12 or late in the fight against Meldrick Taylor, hopelessly behind, he came out and knocked him out. He went for it. Canelo didn't even enter his mind to go for it late in the fight. And had it entered his mind and he tried to pull out just one late round, he would have actually stole the draw, just like he did in the Golovkin fight. So it didn't even enter his mind, and it's the little subtleties, because when you're dealing with all-time greatness, you're changing little subtleties, you're comparing little subtleties, and for me, that was one of the little subtleties where Chavez gets the check mark, you know.
What do you think will be next for Canelo? Do you think he will look to make good of a rematch with Bivol, or do you think he'll go back towards that Triple G trilogy in September?
I don't know what he's going to do, but I don't think he can beat Bivol. So I think stylistically he's got to do things that he's never done before, which is, mainly learn to fight at a heavier pace, at a faster pace, and he's never done that. He never even did that early in his career when he lost to Mayweather, when people said it was inexperience, but inexperience doesn't mean you can't pick up the pace, so he never picked up the pace that fight either. So I don't think that he can, he's able to pick up the pace. People will tell me, the Golovkin's second fight, he picked up the pace. He did not pick up the pace. He was just walking him down, but he didn't actually throw more punches, He had a very tight guard, and he came forward, and he threw punches for sure, but he didn't throw an elevated number of punches. So Bivol is actually a tricky proposition because he doesn't sit on all his shots. So because he doesn't sit on all his shots, he's able to throw more shots, and it puts rounds in the bank for him, But then he picks and chooses when he sits, and he gets your attention when he sits, especially that he's a bigger guy, and he's a pretty good puncher when he sits on that right hand. So I think it did get his respect. I was watching the fight with David Benavidez on the Boxing Voice YouTube page. And Benavidez made a good point. He said, Canelo was going to the body early, but at a certain point he stopped going to the body. It was mainly because Bivol was starting to get his attention with some of the shots he was hitting him with, and it made him. It can kind of discourage you. So Bivol has enough power, but he's got enough athleticism too. It's a tough proposition. I think Canelo goes for Golovkin. Possibly, it's a winnable fight. The third fight, Golovkin's kind of a fading guy, so it's a perfect situation to come in off a loss and maybe get a win over Golovkin, who's fading, and then you decide if you go for Bivol or not. But I don't think he can beat Bivol.
We've seen Bivol suggest he'd drop down to 168 to face him for the undisputed titles. Would that make any difference, in your opinion, if it was Canelo Bivol at 168 instead of 175?
I think if Bivol dropped down to 168, it would make for talking points and conversation points to sell the fight. But I don't think it would make a difference in the fight. I think the conversation points would be is Bivol weight drained? Conversation points would be is this Canelo's better weight? He's stronger at this weight, so on and so forth. Canelo coming in as the undisputed champion, all talking points which are good to sell and market a fight. But ultimately, inside the ring, I don't think it actually makes a difference now.
Just to add a couple of things I want to get your thoughts on. Haney Kambosos on the horizon, what's your thoughts?
A very good fight, a tough style matchup, really to pick. I mean, it's hard to pick a definitive winner in this fight. I think this is Haney's most difficult opponent he's faced in his career. Thus far, he's faced either guys we never heard of, or faded guys like Linares, or guys that are too small like Jojo Diaz, right? So this is his first bona fide lightweight, and it's obviously the world champion, who's a physical guy and has a physical presence in there. But I think also Haney has the physical tools to match up well with a Kambosos. Kambosos is a bit more flat-footed. Haney has the athleticism. So the question mark is, does Haney have the mentality to stay in this kind of a fight, to be in this kind of a fight, have the staying power to be in there, and not only not be a front runner, but also to continue to use that athleticism and better talent to get the better of the rounds against Kambosos. And that's really a hard thing to predict because we haven't seen Haney in that kind of a fight yet, so we don't know what his mentality is in those kind of fights, as Kambosos brings it to him in a different manner than other guys have in the past, and Kambosos will bring it to him in a different manner than other guys have in the past. So if you're a believer that Haney is not mentally strong, then you're a believer that Kambosos takes the fight. If you're a believer that Haney has the mental fortitude to stay in a fight like this, then you probably believe that Haney has the athleticism to outbox Kambosos. But there's a couple of intangibles. The fight's in Australia. It's a tough one to pick.
Paulie, we've also seen the WBC order a fight between Ryan Garcia and Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz obviously giving a very good account of himself against Gervonta Davis. What's your take if that one was to happen as well?
Styles make fights. I think Ryan beats Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz is a very difficult guy to deal with, but styles make fights. Ryan's longer, flashier on the outside, has good power. He's going to beat Cruz to the punch all night and possibly even stop him. And I don't say that with taking Cruz lightly. I just think stylistically it's a difficult fight for Garcia. I think Cruz is actually a difficult proposition against other fighters in the weight class.
Gervonta Davis, Rolly Romero as well, just to stick with that division, is on the horizon. Everybody sees Gervonta as a heavy favourite. Are you no different?
Romero's a good puncher. Gervonta Davis is a good puncher, but I think one thing Gervonta showed us that and reminded us about in the Cruz fight is that he's also able to be a versatile boxer when he needs to, when he had a stubborn guy in front of him. And I think ultimately that probably makes a little bit of a difference in the fight. They're both good punchers, but I think Davis has a few more wrinkles in his style and in his arsenal.
You've got the Charlo Castaño rematch, undisputed fight as well on Saturday night. What's your take this time round?
I tell you, that's another one that hits me like Kambosos and Haney. It's a tough one to pick, man. Firefight. I mean, I think both of those. That's one of those fights that's a shame because you really. I love to watch the Charlo brothers. I love to watch Castaño, and the loser of this fight, people are going to kind of half-heartedly write him off a little bit and decline him in the way they view the fighters in this weight class. I think these are two fun fighters. These are two good fighters. Somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. That's it. That's the way it goes, man. Tough one to pick. Really tough one to pick. I feel like Castano's maybe a little more hungry, and he's the ascending fighter, so maybe slightly favor Castano. But I mean, Charlo is right there still. I mean, Charlo's still at a good age. It's not like he's shot by any means, and if his mentality is focused and strong, he could outbox Castano, who will bring it all night. It's going to be a tough fight, whoever gets the win.
Just a quick one on the heavyweight division. Do you think we have seen the end of Tyson Fury?
I do. I don't think it's the end of Tyson Fury. I think he's always going to be around. I think his image is incredible, charismatic, and he's always going to be sought after. Be it to do boxing exhibitions with guys like Francis Ngannou, or WWE appearances with Vince McMahon at WWE, or just ringside at the big boxing events. I think he's got plenty of money. That's why he doesn't need it financially. I think he's a bona fide star, and he'll always be around. So he doesn't need to fight to really protect his brand and continue his brand. His brand is going to be strong regardless. So I really don't see the need why he would fight.
Do you think he could return, or the only fight he would return for is versus the potential winner of Usyk Joshua 2 for the undisputed crown?
Possibly, but in my opinion, he can probably make more money doing the Ngannou fight because MMA fans are the dumbest fans in sports, and they'll actually will buy into that fight than they would for the Usyk and Joshua winner. And so you'd have so much of a buy-in. It would be like free money, And I say that with respect to Ngannou, who's accomplished a lot in MMA, but this is Tyson Fury sport.
Usyk-AJ 2, what happens, Paulie?
I went into the first fight picking AJ, thinking he was too big. But from what I saw in the first fight, there's a lot of adjustments AJ needs to make. He needs to use his physicality, which I think everybody can see clearly. But the question is, is he in a position to be able to use that physicality? Usyk has great legs, and he's a master of range. In order to use that physicality, you got to figure out a way to close that range and get close enough to do that. And Usyk doesn't just let you in the front door. He fights at angles. He's a southpaw. He's very good with distance and range, and he's very good at picking you off while you're trying to enter that range. So. When I think about it that way, it's a lot tougher to do that than anticipated, and I go the opposite way now. And going into the first fight, I couldn't see AJ losing. I saw AJ only catching up to Usyk. I remember watching the Chisora fight against Usyk and thinking, Chisora had moments where he got inside him. With Usyk, if JJ does that, the fight's over. And from what I saw in that fight, and now it's hard for me. I think Usyk has really developed into a heavyweight, and he knows how to deal with that much better. And it's hard for me to see AJ closing the gap the way he needs to in order to be physical enough to break Usyk down.
Right, Paulie, we'll leave that there and I'll leave you to enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate your time. Thank you for speaking to me on Boxing Social.
Of course, my pleasure.